Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Making Light Two Humans Being. You'll notice there's three of us this week. With me, as always, is Kate Foggo, my fabulous partner in crime, and we also have our personal friend, Vicki Sontheim, with us, who is a fellow soul level intuitive coach, a fellow soul level animal communicator. She is also, I have to look at my notes because there's so much that she has done. She's also a mystic. She is a follower in the Course of Miracles. She has studying with Jeffrey Epstein on healing trauma. She is certified in Eckhart Tolle's Deepening Presence program. I'm thinking if I missed anything, not that I can tell right now, but we'll get into it. She's super smart. She's super intuitive. We're so excited to call her friend. And she has been our TA too. I will say our teaching assistant in some of our classes. So we're very happy to have her with us today. Vicki Sontheim, welcome to Making Light, Two Humans Being.
Three humans being.
Great today.
Three humans being, yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so touched by your opening.
You're welcome.
You're our very first guest, Vicki.
And this is my very first podcast. So yeah,
cool.
We've got a couple of, we're sharing firsts.
We'll be sharing a lot of firsts by the time the day is done.
Probably. So today we actually thought we would talk about shame. Vicki, with all of her studies and intuitive wonderfulness and whatnot, she's actually had a lot of training and work and even own personal healing with shame. And so we thought it would, because we all deal with shame. And so we thought that would be a really interesting conversation to have today. So Vicki or Kate, how do you want to start? Vicki,
I just want to point out that even the word,
I know.
You know, just so, when you first mentioned it, I was like, oh my God, do we really want to go there? But that's actually all the reason more to go. It's one of those feelings that I think for me, probably one of the worst, because there's nothing you can do with shame, is there? Anyway, Vicki, take us away on shame.
Yeah. There is, and that's the cool part. It's like you steered straight into the very nature of shame. It doesn't want to be seen, and by design almost, it's like it shuts us down, puts us into that, kind of collapse. And at the same time, it can activate our fears. And so, yeah, its job, from what I've been studying, could be, and I'm seeing evidence of that, to help guide us through like kind of social mores and norms, because we're designed to connect. We want to connect. And if we do something that goes against the herd, then we get shamed for that. And so, if there were such a thing as healthy shame, and I'm not sure that I believe there is at this point, I think it's gone into, but it would be to kind of help us ride that edge of, or become aware of that edge of where we meet society and where we don't necessarily feel like we blend in with that society. So that could be a way where if we wanted to use it as a useful tool, but it hasn't been used that way.
I don't think you could ever use it as a useful tool.
But the same as like, okay, so I don't even really know where to begin with this. So let me just tune in a little bit and stay in my body, because it's such a rich subject. Like, I know for me, I had a book that I've had for 20 years. I'm pretty sure it's called Healing the Shame That Binds. And I've never read it, right? So just like you said, it's like, no, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. So in the healing trauma program that I'm in right now, they spent 5 months of preparing us, like, how does our nervous system work? How do we get more in our body? And how do we learn to regulate ourselves so that when we really start to go for a deep dive into shame within ourselves, we've got some tools for regulation, right? And so that, I think, is in part why I'm comfortable talking about it, but I also want to be sensitive to anybody who's watching who could get triggered by the idea of shame, and wanting to be mindful of that. In our coaching, how we talk about the negative beliefs and the soul contracts that we've made. I've come to see, and I'm coming to believe, how shame is almost like the driver of the bus in relation to all of those. So like in relation to like in discerning a little bit here between shame and guilt. Okay. Guilt is, I went out, I ran into a person. It wasn't the most pleasant exchange. And I'm not necessarily real happy with how I dealt with that. We talked about a situation. Okay. And I can feel a little, their behavior aside, I hold myself to a standard, and maybe that wasn't the person I wanted to be that day. So guilt is a good pointer to keep me more aligned with my North Star. Mm-hmm. That in and of itself. But when it turns into what I call the guilt of being born, it's like I'm guilty for everything and anybody in all times and all places, and it crosses over into shame.
I just had a visceral reaction to that, and I wouldn't have thought that I would, because just yeah, carry on. Sorry, just pointing out that I wasn't expecting a reaction, and I got one.
Okay, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
I immediately feel like I want to cry. Oh, good. This is how all our meetings end. Right. I don't remember if we talked about this before, when we kept touching on this subject and then we kept saying, stop, save it for the podcast. I honestly think I've held myself to such a high standard. I don't mean about everything, but there are the things that I can control. I feel like I've held myself to such a high standard that when I acknowledge that I have actually, now by that I say I don't necessarily do things that everyone else think is right, but things that I believe to be okay. If I falter from that, even the thought of that, even the trivial things, I fall into an abyss. I can feel it in my stomach now. Over stupid things like losing my temper in public or something like that. I mean, I have done that numerous times for effect and been very proud of myself. I don't believe there's anything wrong in my past life with losing your temper, but when you've done it in a situation where you didn't want to, or I suppose in my days when I drank alcohol and that, and I'd always wake up in the morning and think, did I overstep the mark? And quite often not. I was quite happy with the stuff I'd said, because I'm not shy, I used not to be shy and coming forward, but there's some line there when that's what it is, and that's what fills me with horror, where I know that I have done something that to me is not acceptable. I think it's not even what other people think, it's that, oh my God, what did I do?
Well, and it sounds to me, as you describe it, that because that happened right when I was talking about how
there's
that pointer, but then yeah, I've done some, and where that takes us then is there is something inherently wrong with me. Mm-hmm. I am not good enough. I mean, back to what we have been taught, I am not good enough. I am not worthy.
And now I've just proved it.
Right. And the world is a scary place because all of this is true. I mean, there's scary because of trauma and things that, physical safety issues as well. But shame kind of steers us in all directions. And then the workarounds, the soul contracts that we work around kind of helps us craft. It's like in response to that, then we're determined to be better, do better, or shut down and hide. I mean, it really it's an underlying driving force. So when you cross into that place of, I don't want anybody to see this because, I am just inherently bad. People are going to see how awful and wrong and icky I am, right? Then that's when you're crossing into shame.
But there is a distinction, because I didn't know until I had counselling that my therapist said that my mother publicly shamed me. Like I know from a very, very early age that because my mother found me difficult to control verbally, I wasn't, that I would answer back, and that she would address tricky subjects, should we say, potentially controversial subjects in public. Now, intuitively as a child, I thought she's doing that because she's relying on my good manners not to react in public, because I was brought up, you know, not to answer back, not to do this, not to do that. So I thought that's what she was doing. And I was like, this, and I knew myself, I was like, this is unfair. You are doing this deliberately to shut me up, basically. She would address stuff that she, you know, so I, like, that sort of thing did not shame me. I was not ashamed of that because I knew what she was doing was wrong. I realize now, for the wrong reasons, I was actually giving her much more credit. Apparently she was just, it was just, my counselor said it was shaming. I thought it was her way of manipulating me. Either way, I could feel that manipulation, that she was trying to put me in a position to shut me down so that I could not answer her back because my good manners would prevent that. And yet that doesn't, I have no reaction to that. Do you know what I mean? It's when I know I have done wrong. Even my throat's closing up.
Yeah, and so see there, and that's another thing. Shame has a very visceral somatic reaction in the body. It's not just something we think. It's not. It's a state, just like fear is a state. Anxiety is a state. You know, it's a state like any other state, and it has a physiological response in our bodies as well. And so when you see your throat closing up like that, that's one of your good indicators that something in the line of shame could be going on. I mean, other things could be happening too, but it's like
never happened before.
You kind of just steer right into, you know, some of the jewels of the subject, Kate, because we are, I mean, by our parents when we're young, when we don't do what our parents want us to do, oftentimes parents will use shame. But it's, I mean, when we look out into the world, our political systems, the churches, I mean, historically, how often has shame been used to control? I mean, and it's so easy to do that because we all have it. It's part of the human experience to have the shame. It's just the part of us that, I'm going to say, more than any of the others that I've wrestled with so far, doesn't want to be seen. And therein lies its power. You know, it plays behind the scene and drives the bus so out of our awareness.
Something you said there, but I feel like I'm hogging the limelight, Julie. So if you've got anything, you go.
Yeah.
You go, girl.
Thank you. I had a question, actually. How is shame different from regret and or guilt?
Okay. So yeah, talking about that, regret would be I have done something that either I'm aware of, or I have a sense of something that I have truly actually done that I don't feel good about.
Like and unkind words to somebody, like knowing that you said something unkind.
And it's related to this now moment, right? You know, more often than not, it's something that happened recently. I mean, yeah, we can, if we never go back and deal with our guilt as we go along, like any other emotion that we push aside, it can build for us and it can be hard. But even in doing that, you know, it can create this environment of a shame. So like I said, this current day example of I did something, I don't feel good about what I did, I regret what I did, I feel guilty about what I did. So that's in the present moment. And there is something that actually transpired that has some truth in the present moment or in the recent past that I want to look at and address in myself, right? It's healthy in that way to help me be the person that, as I align more fully with my soul, that I truly want to be, right? Shame, on the other hand, has no, it's not true. It tells us that we're awful. It tells us that we're, like, to use a phrase, I'm shit, right? It tells us all these things, just like the voice of our ego in A Course in Miracles, right? It's like it tells us all these things that just are not true. It doesn't really have any, it doesn't need to have any basis in reality. Does that make sense? And it's usually associated with things that have happened in our past. And that can be events, you know, like our training, it can be teachers, it can be friends, it can be our parents, it can be transgenerational. You know, we can carry it forward from previous generations. into ourselves, if our parents or those close to us have unhealed trauma. And, it can come through us. It can come to us in many different forms. But essentially, part of being human is we have this. And we don't really have, how to put this? You know what? This isn't coming in clearly for me right now, so I'm not going to try and frame it. So what I will point to is what, like in our work, and especially in A Course in Miracles, we cultivate peace, we cultivate love, right?
Mhm.
And in any spiritual practice, it could be meditation, whatever spiritual practice works for us to find that essence of who we are, which is essentially compassion, right? Love, joy, compassion. So as we learn to develop a sense of compassion, be it for ourselves, be it for others, be it for our animals, right? That's a great place for developing a source of compassion. Once we have that and it's developed enough that we can bring it inwards towards ourselves and direct it towards shame. So I've been doing it, and I guess I'm making the assumption that you have as well, that as we watch inside of ourselves and become aware, we do so with loving awareness and loving kindness. And so it invites more of ourselves to come forward and present, right?
Mhm.
And so that same tool works to help unpack and unravel shame. And so rather than, same as with any other state or emotion, rather than pushing it away, if we can steer into it lovingly and say, hey, welcome, what do you got to say? I'm really interested, I'm here, I care.
Yeah.
And that can help it to unwind and to unpack.
Yeah. And I would say, sorry, Kate, I'll let you go. The shame, either pushing it away or holding on to it.
Right.
Right. Instead of either one of those states, stepping into it and understanding it. And where does it come from is what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
And the reason I talked about having a spiritual practice and it doesn't need to come through a spiritual practice. It's just that's what's worked best for me. I'm imagining if with an animal, working with animals, they help us develop compassion for them. And then through that, it filters into ourselves. But some form of practice of compassion that can lead to self-compassion.
Yeah.
Right. And so having that helps us navigate, because it is a visceral response in our bodies. And as we go to places in our bodies where we haven't necessarily brought our awareness before and have been holding on, it can open up, and it can be tough to hold on and both feel what we're feeling and feel the compassion and the love at the same time. And so developing some degree of regulation of being able to stay present with this feeling of compassion and what we're feeling at the same time. That can be kind of like a bit of a bumpy or challenging part. And so that's why I kind of took us into cultivating where in our lives can, where can we anchor that compassion in our lives so that we have it and can fall into it easily in the places that we need it. And shame is a place that yeah, we need it. We need to bring compassion to shame.
Yeah. And the animals can help us do that, is what you're saying, as far as anchor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can be an anchor or some other aspect of love, unconditional love, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
right?
nature is a good place to help anchor that as well. At least, for me, it's one place that I find it very regularly.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Kate, you wanted to say something, I think, because I was excited about my question.
Sorry, the reason I'm looking down, just so you know, because both for everyone else that's here, for Julie and Vicki, I always make a joke that they're really highbrow for me, so I always keep my phone nearby to have a quick look at the definitions of. I'm completely out of my depth with these ladies, so just making it real.
Oh,
I was looking at. Hey?
Stop it! You are not.
I was looking at, so I do emotion code, and we have a table of emotions, and just out of interest, I was looking at how they are both described, because for me, and I know that it's a very personal thing, and actually what I like about Abraham Hicks is they say don't pay attention to the words, it's the feeling, because everybody's got a slightly different description. But for me, it's a matter of degree. Like, to feel guilty about something is to feel regret about an action. So that's those two on the same sort of level. shame to me is much more insidious. Like, I may feel guilty, but it will pass. Shame is when I can't even express it. But actually, looking at their description, it is more strongly worded. So shame is a feeling of being wrong, defective, disreputable, painful feeling of having, oh God, I'm getting a reaction again.
Awesome that you do that though. That's so cool.
No, it's not cool. I'm not ready to turn around and face it yet. All right.
Okay.
Experience something, the painful feeling of having done or experienced something dishonorable, improper, foolish. I think foolish is actually, ironically, one of the things that gets me is when you have that gut wrenching, oh my God, that was so fucking stupid. Why did I do that? When you see that something, not necessarily trivial, but something without thought that has caused tremendous pain to someone. Humiliation, and humiliation is another one of those words. Yeah. Disgrace, not so much for me, but humiliation, the lowest vibration of all the emotions, leads to guilt, depression, and even suicide. So the way that guilt's just thrown in there. And then under guilt, we've got, it doesn't feel to me quite as damning, a feeling of having done wrong or committed an offense. So that's almost like that's someone else's rules. Almost feeling responsible for harmful actions of another, abuse, parents, divorce, death, etc. Often accompanied by feelings of depression, shame, and self-abuse. One thing that occurred to me when you were talking, I'm not going to go into the whole COVID thing, but I find, when I look at what's happened in the world recently and how speech and free speech and so many things they've gone out the window. In Scotland, at least, you're not allowed to, or no, there is no airtime given to any. I know everyone thinks it's all past. My worry is that the minute it happens again, we're going down the same road. Nobody was allowed to speak out. Nobody was allowed to, or maybe there wasn't, they're not allowed. There was no airtime given to any other opinion. And I used to think there was no way ever that Britain could ever be subjugated by another country, like if Germany or Russia attacked us, that we, the British, would find a way through it because, because there are so many ways that you can get around things. It's like if they can't get your mind, they can't get you. So I never believed that would be possible. COVID has taught me that, and this is through shame, we have all gone along with it because of the shame associated. So I may say, I don't want to stay at home. Right. And I may, after a few months, have gone, God damn it, you can't make me. And I think there's a lot of people who would do that. But it was the shame of what you might be doing to another human being, that you are transmitting a disease. It was all based around shame. So I think a lot of people would have gone, hang on a minute, this ain't working. We're not doing this, lockdown, as information, but the information being shut off for one thing, but it was that feeling that you personally would be responsible for the death of another if you broke these rules. And it's like a whole of society, and not just in Britain, has just gone dumb. We've all just gone, oh, we'll just, and gone along with it. Anyway, enough said, but I think that's the power of shame.
Yeah, well, and here in the States too, I think it's the same way. And for me, what you touched on one of my shame points that and it's like I'm weighing in with myself. Am I comfortable saying this in a more public forum? It's something that I've chosen very carefully who to say and who not to say it to, right? Mm-hmm. Because I'm afraid of feeling shamed about it. I've had COVID. I've had long COVID since then, right? So, but I have not been vaccinated. I caught COVID before I could get vaccinated. And when I check in with my guides and my inner guidance, I feel icky and creepy inside about this vaccination. And so, yeah, and not for everybody. I mean, and when I check with my guides, what I hear is, not everybody, but for me, it serves in alignment with the greatest and highest good. It serves the best and highest for me not to do that. And so I'm trusting that. And yet I haven't, and I feel like it should be a personal choice for everybody.
Yes. But it's like that choice has been taken away from us by shame.
And I don't judge anybody who has been or who hasn't been, and where I used to judge was all the people fighting about whether you should or you shouldn't. And even that, it's like, no, I'm not going to go there anymore. But yeah, so I guess I just outed myself here, because as you were talking about that, I was feeling my shame about not wanting anybody to know that I haven't been vaccinated. Although I do feel that I have been vaccinated as well as anybody else through having.
You don't need to explain yourself, Vicki.
Right.
It's
right.
okay. That's your shame talking.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you. I love that.
Yeah, you don't need to, because I only got vaccinated because it was too bloody inconvenient. No, at first I did because they shamed me. I don't believe in these vaccinations. I think they're a crock of shite personally, and I'll put it out there. There is absolutely no evidence that they've done much at all. Regardless of what anyone says, there is no control group, so nobody knows whether there is absolutely no way of ever knowing what the true. Okay, I'll shut up. But it's such a powerful thing. I mean, I wasn't going to get, after the first two, as soon as I learned that it wasn't stopping me passing it on, which was the only reason I was getting it, I said, right, that's it, I'm not doing any more. And then I wanted to go and see my sister in France.
Right.
And you're just like, but as Abraham, I'm sure I listened, and I think Abraham Hicks said the same thing, that if you think you need the vaccine, you do. If you don't, you don't. Your body, but it's all about your beliefs and what power you put in that. If you sit at home worrying that you're unvaccinated, you're actually better off going and get vaccinated regardless of anything, but that's a law of attraction thing, that basically how you feel is infinitely more powerful than anything else that we humans can dabble around.
Right.
Anyway, I'll shut up again.
No, that's okay. What I'm noticing too is just kind of like my visceral response to having outed that shame, right? It's like, I am ashamed about this. I am hiding this, which is one of the tools shame uses, right? And now I've said something about it, and it's like I feel part of me opening, part of me relaxing, part of me kind of wanting to cry a little bit. And then now I'm looking for that compassion towards myself, that part of me that says it's okay for me to listen to myself and do what I want to do and what feels best to me, even if society and many people that I love are telling me, no, it's not okay to do that. And so it's like it's out, it's in the open. And I can't say that it necessarily feels good yet, but it feels better than keeping it tamped down and hidden. So I'm feeling it just open up inside of me in a way. So just noticing that it's interesting to me. I've been doing a lot of that in this last month and finding things that but I haven't really outed myself on any of them.
You just have.
So as Kate was looking up shame and regret and guilty, I was too, because I've got Brene Brown's book right here in my lap.
Yeah.
Of the Heart. She's got a number of books, right? She's a self-proclaimed shame researcher. She is a researcher. She some of her first work was really on shame. She has a whole section in the book on shame, and it's in a chapter actually that's called Places We Go When We Fall Short. Because the focus of this book and the complementary series on HBO is words and how we use words and she puts them into buckets throughout the show and even in the book. And it's so funny because the picture that's in the book for this beginning of the chapter is a dog that's eaten a chair. But shame is part of this. So it's shame, self-compassion, perfectionism, guilt, humiliation, and embarrassment. And Vicki, just when you were talking about the shame and kind of keeping it in and letting it kind of fester, there's a graphic in here. I'd pick it up, but the book's getting a bit unwieldy, but it's a petri dish with shame in it. And there's 3 little droppers. One's labeled silence, one's labeled secrecy, one's labeled judgment. And in the next panel, it shows shame just festering with those things being added. And then the next frame is a dropper with empathy coming on over onto shame. And it's lessened. It's not gone completely, but it goes from this big, huge like oil spill to this tinier little drop. And so there's a whole aspect in here. But what I thought was super interesting, and I don't know, Vicki, this is where I'm curious, if this has come up in your studies. But perfectionism is a signal that there's shame behind it.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes
Yeah.
complete sense. That makes complete sense on so
Yeah.
many different levels. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Perfectionism
I
is
started this
way-
by, sorry, I was going to say, I started this by saying I have held myself to such a high account.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And it makes perfect sense with our coaching as well, right? You know, it's like,
Look at this. Sorry, I just realized I'm sitting
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah. Mhm.
I am actually, I want to, and if I get too far off track, and let me know, Julie.
Yeah.
But what I couldn't, I was just noticing it. I was listening to you, but I was noticing this. And so back to the subject of outing myself again, and how I was feeling about that. As I continued to rest with it, I could breathe a bit more deeply. I felt myself opening more, my heart opening more. And then I'm starting to feel this sense of relief.
Mhm.
You know, it's like, I don't have to hold on to this anymore. I didn't explode. The world didn't end. You know, it's like lightning didn't strike over there someplace and it was all my fault. You know, it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's like
Making light, healing people everywhere.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Vicki.
well, and one of the visions that I was getting, I think I said early on, I think that shame is actually kind of like the secret driver of the bus, right? For all these workarounds and negative beliefs. And so by bringing compassion to that, it's like, yeah, it would be great if we could, stop shame from driving the bus, right? But the visualization and sense I was getting was like, okay, yeah, shame may continue to drive the bus, but it's doing so with love as its companion, or with light as its companion. And so for now, that would even be, I think, just a huge shift moving forward.
If compassion drove the bus.
Yeah, you
I
know,
mean, that's
and
how I see like shame and light becomes compassion to me.
precisely right. Because I mean, there hasn't been anything yet that if I allow myself to experience fully in the light, right, that hasn't shifted or dissolved or lessened in some way, shape, or form. There hasn't been anything yet that once brought to the light,
Yeah.
you know, doesn't become the light, I guess, is like how you said it, is a good way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting when you were talking about shame in that last situation, and how yourself, like how when you sat with it for a minute and you allowed yourself feel it and you gave it compassion. And I'm paraphrasing what you said, because I just,
Beautifully.
you were talking like, okay, good. Because I'm just like, I was feeling like what you were saying, if you will. And I, as Kate will know, I always go to the social justice, political realm. And I'm like, that in any situation, in any conversation, any issue that is facing the countries at large, human populations at large, even the idea of integration with nature, if we just had conversations where we could honor everyone has some shame, and instead of using it again as a weapon, but allowing the compassion to come in. I think particularly right now, the issue that comes to me is systemic racism. If we had the conversation about what all took place and what it did to all of us, and how we can recognize those feelings of shame, because I feel like shame is just so buried, we can't even access it, which is why people do this to the conversation. And there's so much to learn.
Where do you start? Where do you begin with it, right?
Yeah.
Where do you, it's,
Well, there was when I was on a retreat a couple of years ago, and I think we had a conversation about this in book club. Either one of you might remember, and I think Sally told me what race of people it is. There is a race of people who, when someone does wrong or breaks the social norm, they all sit around that person, and every single person says something wonderful or something they love about that person. And so that's how, I don't know how we introduce that, but it's actually such a powerful thing. And when I went through that in a slightly different context, she hadn't done anything wrong, but as one of the this is how it came up on the retreat, was that one of the Buddhist rituals when you become whatever it is, when you actually get into like the religion, as she was being not ordained, but whatever it is, into the group. She's a lady who lived in the islands, so there was no local group. So she said, well, I can't be a Buddhist with my local group. Can I be a Buddhist of the group that was running the retreat? So they did this little ceremony, and part of the ceremony was we all had to say things about that lady. Now, I didn't dislike her, but I wasn't particularly like fond of her or anything like that. But we all said something. Oh my God, did I love her more after that? You know, it was just such a, like a part of me, there's a little bit of my Kate's little cynical brain, because this is a few years ago, where I'd gone, oh God, really, you know, like, do people really do this shit? And you know, but I was really moved by it, that just even, you know, it was brilliant. So I don't know if we could introduce that. Would that help?
Yes, yeah.
I think we are, just by being willing to talk openly and compassionately about it as well. You know, because shame hides so much. It's like what we're doing now, be it on a grand scale or a small scale, you know, it's like we're introducing this idea to the collective.
But to talk about shame almost requires you to admit or discuss what you're ashamed of, and I think that's probably a good enough reason for a lot of people never to go there. You know, do you?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, and we don't necessarily have to do it, you know, out there first either. But to me, the work out there, I mean, it begins in here with me, right? It's like I heal my own shame so that I'm perpetuating less shame in my interactions with other people out there.
So for me, for example, because you've seen my reactions, obviously I have elements of that. And so for our viewers, Vicki, what do I do then when I recognize that I feel I'm feeling that? What do I do? What practical steps can I take?
Do you mind if I answered that by addressing something that I was noticing in myself just yesterday and the steps that I'm taking?
Yeah.
And I'm still working with part of this. So it's not like an immediate fix or anything like that. But okay, in our group Be Open, Danielle's group Be Open. Okay. I've been being a little bit more involved with that lately as I'm kind of healing my fear of connection with people, right? And so but because this is a group and I really honor this group, there's also kind of like a social pressure here for me, right? It's like the need to be perfect, the need to make sure I say everything just right. And there was a conversation that somebody had started about nature and relationships with trees and plants. And one of the women in there commented back to me about how she prefers the company of animals to the company of people. And I think all of us in this group and many animal communicators feel this way. And you know, myself included, that's in the process of a shift for me. But I could really understand what she was talking about. And I decided, it took me a few days to really decide if I was going to craft a response to that or just, you know, hit the heart, say, I like this. And I felt drawn to craft a response to it. And as I was doing that, I noticed in me, it was a voice starting to talk that I didn't recognize. I mean, I watch myself, right? I know the voice of my ego. I know my guides when my guides are talking to me. I know when I'm kind of my inner teacher, my soul. I know this, right? This voice had the calmness of my guides and of my inner teacher, right? But what it was saying was something that I would have expected to come from my ego. And I really felt ashamed of what it was saying. And it was essentially saying that humans are filthy, vile, disgusting creatures. But it was saying it with such calmness, right? And so I've got this going on. What do I do with this? And so I didn't put a big bombshell in there, but I named it. But just by naming what I was comfortable naming in the moment, right? And then I looked inward at what was happening with curiosity and also with compassion. And I'm getting pretty good at this with myself, of welcoming whatever's there, and also being able to regulate and modulate how much of it I dig up at a time, right? So if to the extent I can stay compact, so it's like a dance, right? So I wanted to shut it down because I was ashamed of it, but it kept coming back to me. And it's like, okay, so I sat with it in my daily practices and just tuned in to my inner teacher, my guides, and I started asking more about it. And then it started to, then I started to have the visceral response to it. It's like in my gut, in my throat, like you talked about. It's like I just felt such disgust for the human race and in general as this voice was talking to me. And I noticed the shame and that I had around that. And that unpacked it, and it allowed, and I really feel that it is a voice of shame that was talking to me, right? And telling me what it has to say. But then something even more happened. You know, it was this dance. Okay, I've seen this much, now I'm going to step back. I've seen this much, and as much as I could meet with compassion each time and stay present with, so that I was accompanying the voice and not like shame tends to want us to do. Then this morning I sat with it again, and I started to see a portal, almost like I see sometimes when like when deep healing or with something within our lineage is coming through, right? So like this felt more like my father, it felt more masculine, and then it went even further than my father. It went to my paternal grandfather, who I really didn't even know, but I had the knowing that this voice of shame was being passed down to me transgenerationally, right? And then I started to open my heart even more to it, if that makes sense. It's like, oh, okay, this is in each of us. It's like this is going on in each of us, and it's passed along to us generation after generation after generation. And then all of a sudden, it's like I'm starting to feel this overwhelming sense of compassion for this voice that's telling me, you know, humans are just vile, disgusting creatures, right? But in that, it's like it loses its hold on me. It's like then I see it for what it is. And then I see it for this call for love that just is looking for light in a way to come up and be seen. Mm-hmm. Does this help at all, Kate? So it really was like this, I see you, I feel you. Okay, I go back, I'm curious, I'm compassionate. And then I see and I feel a bit more, and I take it and I assimilate it and I integrate it. And then I go back and do it some more. So it's like I'm tracing this thread that I'm actually really honored. I think it says a lot about my devotion to my healing and the teachers that I've had along the way, that this part of whatever I'm carrying in my body, right, felt so even comfortable to show itself to me, you know, and that it was met with the love and compassion that this part of me, I'm not going to keep saying it, that this part of me has probably been yearning for since I incarnated, if not before. Do you know what I mean?
So go ahead, Kate.
No, you go, Judy.
I was going to say, so it's really recognizing when really, when you hear, how do I want to say this? When you hear something wanting to come from you, this may be a signal, I guess. When you hear something coming from you that wants to be more negative or more judgmental. I mean, I'm using words to dance around shame, but to kind of give people a feeling as to what that would feel. So you had a voice to some degree in your head that was saying, humans are vile. So there was a judgment passed, there was a negative feeling passed, and you're like, wait a minute, what is this? And instead of fighting it or pushing it away, sitting with it and actually coming to a point of being able to, oh, I see the compassion for that feeling, and even then going further and understanding where it ultimately came from. Does that kind of summarize, do you feel?
I would say to a large degree. I mean, and the shame piece in there, because we always dance around that shame piece, right? It's like it kept coming back up again, you know, and so I kept being with that part too, you know, but unpacking that actually helped the rest of it to come through.
But for those of us that don't necessarily hear a voice, you know, if I'm just feeling
Right.
shame or whatever, some emotion that I don't, are you saying you don't necessarily have to work out why, what, whatever, you just have to give it your loving attention to see where it takes you?
Yeah, I would say so. And this actually, I'm gonna say, started with a feeling. And
Okay.
the feeling was actually that social pressure to, it's like, I need to get this perfectly, I need to say this right. Okay, I'm a slick, I'm a slack, I hold myself to Danielle's standards. You know, how can I be a good, I mean, I can be a good animal communicator and prefer animals company to, you know, humans company. But how can I be a good coach if I don't want to connect with individuals? And so I saw that internal struggle going on within myself.
Yeah.
And so that was the part that I first rested with. And
Right.
then underneath this voice, and I really feel like this deeper voice is because I have been very consistent about just whatever rocks I can find, you know, lifting them up and you know, being curious about everything, right? And then I'm starting to get really good about meeting whatever comes with compassion. I mean, I'm not perfect, of course. I'm human. I'm never going to be perfect at it, but I've really developed some consistency with that, you know. And the other thing is, and this voice, Julie, came through almost like a knowing comes through to me. It's like who are you? Who the, you know, what is this? Who the heck are you? Because it was so quiet. And in the same way, our guides come through and we just know, right? It's like this tried to come through as a knowing. And it was very, very interesting, but cool.
Yeah, I feel like it really wanted to get your attention. And the way to do that for you was to be along the same loving tone as the other higher powers that you communicate with. And that way it really got your attention, because you're like, what? No, because if it had come at you angry, you would have been like, no, I'm going to stay in my place of love. But because it snuck in there, it was like, now you were ready to do it. Does that?
Right. I had to actually pay more attention to it. I mean, if it just kind of fell into that negative feedback loop, right, about, you know, me talking shit about myself, which is actually diminishing too. But, you know, it's like if it had fallen in with those voices, you're right. Okay, here's another one.
Yeah. I also want to say, when you were describing wanting to be perfect, when you responded to this person in our community, to hold yourself to Danielle's standards, which of course we all have our own translation of what those, because she would say be you, but you know, right? So, but this perfect, you said the word perfect, and I'm like, oh, look, there's perfectionism, which is a
right.
Yeah. So
Yes.
yes, it's fascinating. That's a really good explanation. Thanks for sharing that scenario. I mean, continue. Don't let me stop you. I'm just like,
oh no.
Thank you.
That was, and I was actually, that was what was up for me this morning as I was just kind of resting with myself and my guides. And I was actually kind of hoping that the conversation, and again, I turn it over to the highest good before we start, but it was like, I was kind of hoping that it might steer that way so that I could get input from my two such esteemed friends and colleagues, because you're both just so
Who are they?
Well played, Kate.
You know who you are.
Oh, Kate, did you have any other thoughts or questions?
I have loads, but I'm conscious of time. I think we're going to have to get Vicki back. I also need to, I feel like I need to go away and digest this, because you've rattled something in me that, oh, more work. Just
More love.
more love to come. It's just, you know, don't get me wrong, there are areas that I have not been to because they're not my focus at the moment, but this just, and I don't even know what this is, but I, you know, that there is obviously something that needs me to look at it, because I don't normally get a visceral reaction. I don't normally get a feeling in my throat of, I just think there is more there that I probably need to poke at gently.
Love
And then we can come back for another.
Yeah,
What's that?
with love and compassion.
Yeah, and there's just
Absolutely.
so much wisdom in what you just shared. There's so much wisdom in just what you just shared.
I'll have to watch it back.
See, Vicki, she's highbrow too. I don't know what she keeps talking about. She's just as
Oh no, because I just get I get a little lost. I think it's because I like anyone who knows me from my previous life would be pissing themselves laughing right now, because I've just been known for this. It's got to be black and white. I don't like the fuzzy stuff in between. So I really struggle, you know, when you say you're integrating, what do you, I knew last night in the call, I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? You need, you know, I need a box to put that in. This is, you know, so when you talk about just the way you talk sometimes, my brain just goes into overdrive about trying to nail down what you're saying, when I think Eckhart Tolle says it best in one, I don't know if it's in The Power of Now or one of the other ones, where he says, don't worry if you don't understand this, what you understand will go, what you need to understand will go through. You know, it's a bit like that. It's like, these are not things you can describe necessarily, despite Julie's extensive work with words. There are some things you can't describe to other people because they're not ready to hear it. So I'm not putting myself down here, but maybe I'm just not quite ready to hear it, because some of it goes in, it's like I sort of know what you're talking about, and I could probably say it all again to someone else, but there's another little bit of me that's trying to nail it down and work it out, and it just doesn't fit. So it's just easier to call you highbrow than say, I don't really understand what you're saying.
No, Kate, here's another possibility, is that you're already past it, and so it doesn't hurt you.
Of course.
That could be.
This is it. This is what Gary says. He just walks around the house going, well, I'm so enlightened. I don't need to go through this. That's like, really? Okay.
It's so funny you talk about going through and you need the box to put things in. And it's like, I'm all about tearing open all the boxes and seeing how many boxes I can get rid of, right? It's like I feel like boxes are confining me, and I want out of the boxes. So
Well, good. And so do I. It's just my habit to want to, yeah. I mean, people used to say this to me, and you know, it's the whole engineering community as well. And they used to laugh at this. What, black and white, Kate? You know, do you remember in our first, sorry, I'll shut up in a minute, but remember very early on, Danielle said in one of her classes, she said, what you were analytical, that you're an analytical overthinker. She goes, that's really strange, you know, because I'm not like that at all. And I swear I didn't get that she was just taking the piss, because there are so many people attracted to her that are very analytical, scientific, logical thinkers and all. I didn't even know she was joking. Like, it took me about a year and a half to think she's said that a few times, like, because I'm so moved that I don't get it. It used to be a huge joke at work, because I'm literally, it's so ingrained in me that I don't know I'm like that. It's like, I'm like, I don't, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean black and white? Explain yourself. So there we go.
Yeah.
So in this version, engineers go, woo.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that is as far as we can take this conversation. In the essence of time, I feel like we could just have a
I
pig
do.
and talk all day and film the whole entire thing, a running marathon.
I do, but I suspect it would just be us three.
Oh,
Like
I don't
hour
know.
23.
Yeah. I think there's some other highbrow people that follow us.
I don't know if they'd watch 23 hours of us.
Yeah, I don't know. I think some people would like to come over and have a sleep out. I'm just saying, your sleepover. But anyway, doesn't matter. All right. So should we wrap it up, Kate?
Did you say shall I?
Should we? But go ahead.
Yes, I reluctantly, again, we'll have to do this again, Vicki, if you, once you've got over the nerves of actually outing yourself on, well, it's not quite national TV, but it's pretty close, you know, whether you'll come back and continue the conversation, because we'd really like that.
I have so thoroughly enjoyed this, and it was such a rich experience for me. Thank you so much.
I don't even think it will need any editing.
Mm-mm.
I thought we were so professional. Well, maybe if I shut up now, we'll be so professional that we won't need to do any editing, but we'll see. Woo.
Mm-hmm.
A sleepover in Scotland with you in your shed, Kate, is on my bucket list with all of us.
Okay, it'll be tight, but we'll.
Yep. Somebody said sleepover, and I'm like, it's like that's on my bucket list.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then we can go swimming in all the lochs.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Woo. Well, okay, let's stop our personal arrangements and deal with business. Do you want me to see us out?
Yeah.
I have to stop fiddling. I know when I fiddle with my shoes under the desk, it comes out on a recording. So, thank you, Vicki. We are so honoured to have had you here, and I really, really hope you'll come again.
Mm-hmm.
And don't make you cry. So this is wonderful for us, and lots of firsts, I think. So we've done really well there. So I am Kate Foggo, and our guest today was Vicki Sontheim, and a fellow animal communicator, fellow soul level intuitive coach, friend, mentor, teaching assistant, and the list goes on. So I'm Kate Foggo. This is Julie Hurt, and together, well, three of us today have been making light. Three humans beings, three of us together making light, three humans beings. You can follow us on Facebook, you can follow us on YouTube, you just click the links below. You can find us on Instagram. Do subscribe on YouTube to get notified of new episodes, and Julie and I have some exciting things coming up. We're going to set a goalpost to start trying sharing more, so please don't like to beg, breaking all the social norms, but we would really like you to, if you enjoy our episodes, please do forward on to your friends, do subscribe, and please do forward it on to other people. We're trying to get our audience up because we think more people need to hear it. So that's all from us. And I was going to say some cartoon ending, but I won't. But thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
No, I have to.
No.
Otherwise it looks rude. Okay.